which is that one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. You do the intro, I'll do the
Let's do no quotes.
No quotes. All right.
Unless it's like...
No, because then we can just see what the quote's about, and then we can kind of get an example of like what their deal is. Yeah.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
I'm Jay.
I'm Calvin.
And today we're going to talk about at what point does someone consider themselves black, or at what point does someone experience blackness. And we're going to be talking about that through the history, the law, and how it's constructed societally.
So first we're going to go over the one drop rule. This was invented after the Civil War. It was invented as a means to define what made someone black. So based off the name, as you can kind of tell if somebody had, even 1% African ancestry or DNA, they were considered black.
Yeah.
This was really made as a way to keep black people in control after slavery because, when Jim Crow laws were made, they, had to say, okay, well, if these are going to affect black people, what makes somebody black?
Yeah. And Webb Du Bois talks about this as well, because like black people consider themselves black within themselves, and then they also consider themselves black how other people look at them, in my opinion.
Right.
So there's almost a double consciousness of how people see themselves and how society actually sees them. And it's really important because we need to understand why society sees themselves this way and why the black person or the Negro sees themselves a certain way, as he said.
Yeah. Moving on from that, The Internalized Oppression, The Psychological Impact of Race by Frantz Fanon. He studied how racism affects the mind. He showed how colonialism and racism make black people feel less in the way that it's constructed. And it kind of allows, someone to see themselves how, the white people would see them. And it kind of naturally makes them feel like, okay, you know what, I'm an object, I'm not a person. Yeah. And that's how they were treated, that's how the laws were constructed.
And it takes a toll on people,
right?
At the end of the day. Nobody wants to be seen as an object.
Absolutely.
They want to be a part of society.
Right, and he studied that, hey, this can make someone truly feel like they are an object, and not a person. So,
and it all starts off about as everyone starts off as a child, and it's from there they're taught about how these black people are suffering, and there's nothing really good for them in the society, and these white kids and everyone in between just thinks of them as a suffering nation or a suffering group throughout society still today, right? Instead of just celebrating the goodness or I guess what black people have done today is one of the most important things, like black business owners, black entrepreneurs. What have they done to break out of the system?
Right.
Yeah. Even a black judge is really important because another voice on how other people is important.
So another thing that we want to talk about is Paul Gilroy. And one of the things that he kind of coined was the fact that blackness, back when he was researching it, was kind of tied to a nation like Africa or something like that. And he kind of figured that out by saying, hey, this black identity was shaped by ships crossing the Atlantic. And that's kind of what made someone black. But what he found is that in reality, race is something that's mixed. Yeah. And that ship became a symbol for races mixing and surviving and staying alive and going to a new place and forming kind of a new identity and culture. And kind of like we were talking about earlier, how, especially in schools, black history is taught through the suffering of the civil rights movement. And it's not necessarily celebrated as much. And it's not shown, hey, look what, even though, this is how we ended up here, look what's come out of it. Look at all these different things, all these new cultures. Especially, all different kinds of cultures mixing, like cities like New York, like Dominican and black culture and Hispanic culture, and in Miami, with Cuban and all those kinds of things. So, yeah.
And continue about the two worlds or the two spaces, like Du Bois would continue. Someone named Cornel West. And he talks about how black intellectuals are trapped in between two worlds, saying that, are you accepted in these spaces, these white spaces, or are you accepted in these black spaces? And you need to navigate that as a person through definitely an intellectual way, because
Right, as a black scholar, yeah.
because all these people above you are in white structures that are already built, and that's just what it is. And continue about schooling, like some people have already been through these structures as black people and have strived, and
we have HBCUs now.
Yeah, and exactly, some schools that we truthfully may have needed.
Right, and I think, you know, there's that idea, especially in the academic world, or you know, the high class world of you know, the proper way to act, and how that could be seen as like white.
Yeah.
You know, you're acting white, you talk white. I actually have a friend very close to me who is in nursing school, and she's, you know, dark skinned black woman, and she's always talked about her whole life. Oh, people always say I sound white. Whenever I meet someone new, they go, "Oh, you sound different.
Yeah.
You didn't sound how like I thought you would." And you know, both of the people that she grew up with in her home were, you know, had high academics. They were in, you know, white collar jobs.
Yeah.
But that's not white or black. I think it's just, you know, this is
Structure
proper
of their
vocabulary.
life.
And
Yeah.
but I think it's more of a societal perception than it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then you know, also from the other side, you know, you see, the black culture going, oh, she's acting
white.
She's acting like she's better than us,
Mm-hmm.
or this or that, or she talks all, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that, especially being somebody who has white family members and black family members.
Because there's two consciousnesses, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Just like, yeah.
Herself, she probably sees herself as maybe a little bit white.
Right.
You know? But maybe it's not even her being a little white. It might be maybe proper, or maybe, you know what I'm saying? She wants to be, she's in the nursing world. Her parents they have not talked to her in a certain way.
Right.
She's going to be who she is no matter what. And she's still
a black
person no matter
Absolutely.
what. And, you know, there's definitely a separate reality between nature and culture. She was nurtured away, or culture kind of raised her away in a way, you know, like how she was born and how we were. But in reality, everyone's a hybrid of these two things. Someone might be perceived as too black. I have been perceived as only black, and many of, you know, how people see me, they've never seen me as just a mixed person, or anything like that. They just see me as a black boy.
Well, especially if you go to countries outside of the United States, which obviously we're a little more focused on that. But I mean, I'm sure you can talk about, you know, growing up on military bases outside the U.S. You know, oh, that's a black person.
Yeah,
you know,
like definitely when you're just walking around and people are asking you like questions. They're not really asking you questions about if you're black or not. They already know. They already perceive in the way
you're black.
You're already seen as black.
Yeah.
It does not matter what you sound like. So I think in other like countries, especially in strict Asian countries and Eastern countries, there's more strict laws on how people act, and definitely they don't want you acting a certain way that culture in America has perceived them to act. And it all goes back to how the schooling is, truthfully.
Yeah, and that kind of hybrid phrase was coined by Bruno Latour, who said, you know, everything is mixed, nothing's truly this or that.
Yeah.
And he said race is the exact same way. So
anything in society.
Yeah. And kind of moving to more towards that celebration of black culture and what it became as black people were allowed to develop their own cultures and communities. Zora Neale Hurston, Harlem Renaissance writer, she wrote about the struggle of being defined by black. And kind of the route she took was, you know what? Society may have these perceptions of me, of how I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to act, what I'm supposed to look like, whether that's from the white side or the black side. I'm just going to do what makes me happy. I'm just going to live my life, and I'm going to define myself. And she kind of was one of the first people to be really outspoken about, I'm a black person. This is what I like. This is what I do. I'm just like anybody else. And if this, because I do it and I'm black, if that makes me black, and that's the way you see it, fine. But
and she navigates it perfectly, in my opinion. And not only that, she's experiencing truthfully the joy of being black instead of focusing on the trauma. But she understands that she holds this trauma and other people will see it a certain way, but she will act this way no matter what. Right. And I think that's what society needs to be about. This is blackness. Blackness is all of this combined and being yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think in school, you know, civil rights movement. You talk about it through multiple grades, starting in elementary school even.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that this Harlem Renaissance was kind of also part of that. What revolutionized the black culture in America, and what meaning to be black is, and celebrating black art, and not just, hey, this is us fighting for our rights. This is where we came from, and
but
this
we're
is what
actually
this is
having fun,
right?
And being an artist in every single way, and
right.
Scientists,
we're more than just
politicians,
former
slaves,
former victims, former slaves. We can thrive, not just survive in America. We can create and add to, and we can develop our own new culture.
Yeah. And this culture this is a culture that includes everyone. Right. At the end of the day,
right. It's not just African descended, slaves or immigrants.
It's
or whatever.
anyone,
right?
And anyone who experienced blackness specifically, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's just like any other culture. Any race can be exposed heavily to any other culture, and I don't think that makes them black. But there's absolutely different cultures based on race, geographical location for sure. But it's not unique to just the people there. It can travel. It's more of a feel and an experience than it is, specifically this is a black neighborhood with black people and this is how they act and talk. No, it travels. It's anything. So yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you look at the groups in Texas, they've been perceived as white or like as country, and realistically, this is how they were born.
Right.
And this is their group.
They grew up around horses on farms.
And then you have people from Florida, and then you have people. These people are also different culturally.
Absolutely.
They don't celebrate the same things.
Yeah.
People in Louisiana don't celebrate the same things as people in Washington, but they're still at the same time.
It's still black culture. Or it's still whatever culture. You go to New York, and Spanish Harlem.
Yeah.
But you can also go to San Antonio, and it's still Hispanic culture, but completely different.
And it's all built on this foundation of almost like a little bit of pride. I feel like you could say that we maybe have built this, and there was trauma to build it, and it may have caused many of deaths, and especially just how does that cross through the generations of people, and what does that put people at a lower it puts people at a step behind, but these people were able to rise up and continue what they're doing through all of this impact, and then fight for their rights and fight for their right to vote,
and put more emphasis on, hey, what happens after this? Now what? So I think it's more than just the history. It's the recent history. It's what's happening. It's what's happened since, in a positive way, to push forwards and not absolutely remember what happened, but let's also let's grow. Let's do more. And I think a lot of these writers and scholars help push that, and obviously first we had to understand that double consciousness or whatever it may be.
Two worlds that they had.
The one drop. Then how do we get to how do we become artists? How do we make it normal for not a black scholar but just a scholar? Kind of a thing.
I agree, and I feel like that's a good conclusion to this. Thank you, Calvin. I appreciate you coming by.
It was a pleasure, Jay.
Thank you. That was fast.
That was good.
Now let's beat up women
and say racist things.
And say racist things.
Black people.